There are moments in life that divide your existence into two distinct chapters. Before and after. Before the fire, after the fire. Before I knew the truth, after I could never unknow it. They say that a person's true character is revealed in moments of crisis, when the masks come off and you see who they really are. But what happens when the person you've trusted most uses that crisis uses your own fear and vulnerability to serve his own purposes? What happens when you realize that the catastrophe that was supposed to bring you closer together was actually orchestrated to push you further apart? I spent 23 years married to a man who presented himself to the world as a pillar of integrity, a man who was respected, admired, trusted. But on a single night in November 1986, I discovered that his entire persona was constructed to hide something far more sinister than infidelity or simple dishonesty. He was a man capable of destroying everything: our home, our security, our family's future, to cover up his crimes and escape the consequences of his actions. The fire that destroyed our house was meant to destroy my life, and it nearly did. But it also became the moment when I finally saw clearly. It became the moment when I stopped being blind to the truth that had been hiding in plain sight. My name is Victoria in Somerset. Though my family and close friends have always called me Vicky, I'm 73 years old now, and this story happened in 1986. Though the betrayal began years earlier, back in 1963, when I married a man named James, a man I thought would protect me and provide for me for the rest of my life. Before I continue, my dears, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment where you're watching from. I receive messages from all over the world, and they mean everything to me. This is one of the most difficult stories I've ever told. Now let me take you back to November 1986, the night that changed everything. Grandview, Ohio, population 6,500, a suburb of Columbus with tree-lined streets and well-maintained homes, the kind of place where families put down roots and children grew up knowing the same neighbors their entire lives. James and I had moved there in 1975, 12 years into our marriage, when he'd been hired as the controller at Grandview Manufacturing, a mid-sized factory that produced precision parts for automotive companies. James was a man who appeared to have it all figured out. He was handsome in a steady, reliable way, the kind of man who wore his dark suits with quiet confidence. He had a good job, a growing reputation in the community, and the kind of presence that made people believe he was someone worth listening to. Within 5 years of arriving in Grandview, he'd become known as one of the town's most successful businessmen. We had 3 children together. Robert, who was 19 in 1986, Jennifer, who was 16, and little Michael, who was 8. Robert was handsome and charming, following in his father's footsteps, studying business administration at Ohio State University. Jennifer was an honor student, artistic and sensitive, planning to study architecture. Michael was the sweetest child, still believing that the world was fundamentally kind. I worked part-time as a dental hygienist that allowed me to contribute to our family income, while still being present for the children. We lived in a beautiful 2-story colonial on Maple Avenue, the kind of house people drove by and admired. We had a Mercedes in the driveway. We took vacations to Florida every spring. James and I were both active in the Methodist Church. We hosted dinner parties that were the talk of the town. To look at us from the outside, you would have seen a family that had achieved everything the American dream promised. A successful man at the height of his career, a devoted wife managing a beautiful home, children who were thriving academically and socially, a marriage that appeared to be built on a foundation of genuine partnership and mutual respect. But beneath that facade, beneath the polished exterior, something was rotting. And when it finally broke open, it would nearly destroy us all. Looking back now, I realized that the signs were there from the beginning. I just didn't want to see them. The first thing was James's increasing secrecy about his finances. He'd always been private about money. But by the mid-1980s, it became obsessive. He'd check the mail before I could see it. He'd open bills and immediately file them away in a locked drawer in his study. When I'd ask about our finances, he'd become irritable. I take care of everything, Victoria, he'd say sharply. You don't need to worry about these things. That's my responsibility. I accepted this. That was how marriages worked in those days. The man handled the finances. The woman managed the home. Then there were the business problems. James started coming home tense and distracted. He'd sit in his study for hours, making phone calls, speaking in low voices. He'd mention difficulties at work, audits, and discrepancies, and board meetings. When I'd ask what was wrong, he'd dismiss me. Nothing you need to concern yourself with, he'd say, just business complications. But I could see the stress aging him. Lines appeared around his eyes. His hair seemed to gray overnight. He'd snap at the children over small things. He'd drink more whiskey in the evenings than he used to. There was also the matter of his relationship with Pastor David Harrison at our church. They'd become unexpectedly close, spending time together that went far beyond typical pastor and parishioner interactions. James would speak of Pastor Harrison constantly with an intensity that seemed excessive. They have private meetings in the church office that lasted hours. When I'd ask what they discussed, James would become defensive. Spiritual guidance. He'd say, the pastor is counseling me on some difficulties I'm experiencing. What difficulties? I'd wonder, but I didn't press. I didn't want to be the jealous wife. I didn't want to pry into my husband's personal struggles. Then came the financial anomalies. Money disappearing from our checking account, large cash withdrawals that couldn't be explained, credit card charges I didn't recognize. When I'd finally work up the courage to ask him about them, James would become angry. Stop questioning me. He'd say coldly, I'm working to provide for this family. The least you can do is trust me. The anger frightened me. It was so different from his usual calm demeanor. I'd apologize and back away, convincing myself that I was being unreasonable. That husbands had the right to privacy about finances. Little did I know that James was systematically embezzling money from Grandview Manufacturing. Little did I know that the spiritual counseling from Pastor Harrison was actually cover for meetings about covering up the theft. And little did I know that when everything fell apart, James would be willing to destroy his own home with his family inside it to cover his tracks. November 15th, 1986, a Saturday evening, I was putting Michael to bed, reading him a bedtime story book about a little rabbit and his mother. Jennifer was at a school dance. Robert was at the library studying for exams. James was in his study, ostensibly working on administrative tasks for the manufacturing company. I heard the sirens first. Then the smell, then the smoke dot at first. I thought something had gone wrong at the factory. I went to the kitchen window and saw flames, orange and red, and terrifying licking up the side of our garage. Fire. Our house was on fire. I remember moving in slow motion, running upstairs, grabbing Michael, still drowsy in his bed, screaming for James. He came stumbling out of his study, and he looked strange, almost calm, almost like he'd been expecting this. We need to get out, I screamed, carrying Michael down the stairs. The house is on fire. I know, James said, and there was something in his voice that made my blood run cold. But there was no time to process what that meant. There was only fire and smoke and the need to get my children out alive. I got Michael to the front lawn, his small body wrapped in my arms, wearing only his pajamas. The fire was spreading from the garage to the house with terrifying speed. Flames were visible through the windows. The heat was overwhelming. That's when the fire department arrived, and that's when I saw James standing by his car in the driveway, watching the house burn, just standing there, watching, with an expression on his face that I can only describe as relieved James. I screamed, Jennifer, where's Jennifer? She's at the dance. He said calmly, "She's fine." The house,
The struggles
I
they
sobbed,
faced weren't
watching
just their
flames
story.
consume
They are
the
ours
second
too.
floor. "Everything is burning." "I know," he said, and he didn't sound devastated. He sounded almost peaceful.
The struggles
The
they
fire
faced weren't just
department
their
got
story.
it under
They are
control
ours too.
by midnight. The house was destroyed. Everything we owned was gone or ruined, but we were alive, miraculously.
The struggles
We
they
were
faced
all
weren't just
alive.
their story.
The fire
They are
investigator
ours
came the next morning.
too.
He was a thorough man named Detective Morrison, and he had questions. "Where was your husband when the fire
struggles they
started?"
faced weren't
He
just
asked
their
me
story. They
in
are
his
ours
study.
too.
I said, "Why? The fire started in the garage." Detective Morrison said slowly, "It doesn't appear to be accidental.
The struggles
The
they faced
accelerant
weren't just their
pattern
story.
suggests
They are
deliberate
ours too.
placement. We're looking at arson." My legs went weak. Arson. Someone had deliberately set the fire. You need to ask yourself, Detective Morrison said carefully, whether your husband had any reason to want this house destroyed. I couldn't answer him. I couldn't think. All I knew was that James had looked relieved when our house burned. James had seemed almost grateful. The police investigation took 2 weeks, and during those 2 weeks, the truth about James's embezzlement began to emerge. They'd been conducting an audit at Grandview Manufacturing, and they'd found the discrepancies. James had stolen nearly $400,000 over the course of 5 years. The company was preparing to press charges. There was going to be an arrest warrant issued. And the fire, Detective Morrison believed, though he could never prove conclusively, that James had deliberately set it to destroy financial records that he kept at home, records that might have implicated him in other crimes, records that might have proven his involvement with Pastor Harrison in covering up the theft. When the fire inspector examined the ruins of the house, they found what remained of James's study. And in a fireproof safe that had survived the flames, they found documents, receipts from hotel stays in Cleveland, photographs, love letters between James and Pastor Harrison, proof of a secret affair that had been going on for years. Pastor Harrison denied everything at first. Then, facing charges, he confessed. He and James had been involved romantically for 12 years. They'd met at a seminary conference and had maintained a secret relationship throughout meeting in hotels, taking trips together, using church funds to cover expenses. James had been embezzling money to support this double life. Pastor Harrison had been helping him cover it up. When confronted with the evidence, James didn't deny it. I couldn't let it come out. He said to me, standing in the hotel room where we'd been forced to stay since the fire, I couldn't let you know what I was, what I've been doing. So I had to make the evidence disappear. You burned our house, I said, my voice shaking, while Michael was sleeping upstairs. I was careful. He said coldly, I made sure you had time to get him out. You couldn't have known that. I whispered. You couldn't have known we'd get out in time. He didn't respond.
We can't forget
The criminal
what brought us
charges
here.
came
The
swiftly.
struggles they faced
James
weren't
was
just their
arrested
story.
on
They
charges
are
of
ours too.
embezzlement, fraud, and suspicion of arson, though the arson was never conclusively proven.
We can't
He
forget what
maintained
brought us here.
it was an
The struggles they
accident with the
faced weren't
garage
just their
heating
story.
system,
They are
and
ours
without
too.
definitive proof, they couldn't charge him. Pastor Harrison was also arrested on charges related to financial fraud
The struggles they
and
faced weren't
conspiracy.
just their story.
The community's
ours
response
too.
was immediate and merciless. Our names were in the newspaper. Our shame was public. I was the wife who hadn't known her husband was both an embezzler and a closeted homosexual, engaged in an affair with a pastor. That detail alone in 1986, Ohio made me the object of tremendous judgment. People who'd been our friends stopped returning my calls. Women at the church wouldn't make eye contact with me. The dental practice where I worked let me go within a week. We've decided to go in a different direction, they said. Though we both knew the truth, Robert withdrew from Ohio State.
We can't forget
He
what brought
couldn't
us
bear
here.
the shame.
The struggles
He
they
couldn't
faced weren't
handle
just their
other
story.
students
They are
knowing
ours
who
too.
his father was. He never returned to college, never pursued higher education, and I could see the resentment festering in him,
The struggles they
resentment toward
faced
his
weren't just
father.
their story.
And
They are
somehow,
ours too.
toward me, Jennifer became clinically depressed. She stopped going to school. She'd spend hours
We
in
can't
her
forget
room,
what brought us here.
crying,
The struggles they
refusing to
faced
come
weren't just
out.
their story.
At 16,
They are ours too.
her world had collapsed. Her father was a criminal. Her home was destroyed. Everything she'd believed about her family was revealed to be a lie. Michael had nightmares. Every night, he'd wake up screaming. In his mind, he couldn't separate the fire from the chaos that came after. He developed a terror of fire that lasted for years. He was only 8 years old, and he'd already learned that the world wasn't safe, that people you loved could betray you. We had to move into a small rental apartment. We had almost nothing. James's assets were seized. His salary was garnished to pay back the money he'd stolen. We received a small insurance settlement from the fire, but it barely covered moving costs. The social isolation was devastating. I'd go to the grocery store and feel eyes on me. I'd hear whispers. I'd see women I'd known for years literally turn their backs to me. The church abandoned us not officially, but effectively. Pastor Harrison's replacement didn't want anything to do with us. I went back to dental hygiene work in January 1987, 2 months after the fire. I had to. There was no other option, but no dental practice in Grandview would hire me, so I had to drive to the next town, 30 minutes away, to find work. The practice owner was a kind woman named Dr. Patricia Chen, who didn't know my history and didn't ask Doc. She paid me $9 an hour. It wasn't much, but it was income. I'd work for days a week, spending hours of my day commuting, which meant I was away from my children. for most of the day to supplement this income. I started cleaning houses. I'd go door to door in the neighborhood and offer to clean for $5 an hour. By February 1987, I had 4 houses I was cleaning weekly. The work was brutal, on my hands and knees, scrubbing other people's bathrooms. The chemicals would burn my hands. By March, my knuckles were cracked and bleeding. I also started baking bread, pies, cookies. I'd bake in the evenings after my cleaning jobs were done. My exhausted hands moving through the familiar motions of flour and sugar and butter. I'd take my baked goods to a small cafe downtown, and the owner woman named Susan, who was about my age, would buy whatever I brought her. These are wonderful. Susan said of my first batch of apple pies, "Where did you learn to bake?" "From my mother," I said quietly. "A long time ago." I didn't tell her about James. I didn't tell her about the fight. I just showed up with pies and cookies and bread, and she bought them by April 1987. I was making nearly $200 a week from all my combined work. That was survival. That was barely keeping us afloat. But it was survival. Jennifer recovered slowly. By 1987, she'd returned to school. She was still depressed, but she was functioning. She'd become quieter, more withdrawn, but she was moving forward. Robert remained angry. He'd taken a job at a warehouse, working day shifts, giving me most of his paycheck without speaking much to anyone. I could see the resentment in him, and I understood it. His father had destroyed everything, and his mother hadn't seen it coming. Michael remained terrified of fire. We'd have to leave lights on everywhere when we'd smell cooking smells from neighbors' apartments. He'd panic. It took years of therapy. I could barely afford for him to overcome this debt. By 1988, a year after the fire, I had expanded my baking business. Susan had suggested that I could supply more, that there was a market for artisanal bread and pies if I could produce them in volume. She helped me get access to a commercial kitchen space, and I began producing bread for not just her cafe, but to other restaurants in the area. By 1989, I was making nearly $1,800 a month from all my combined work. That wasn't comfort, but it was stability. It was enough to move us out of the tiny apartment and into a modest house that we could rent, a house with a yard where Michael could play, where we could begin to breathe again. The moment came in April 1990, a community fundraiser for the elementary school, where Michael was in 4th grade. They were auctioning off homemade items and baked goods to raise money for new play. Ground equipment. I donated 6 loaves of bread and for pies, not really expecting anyone to buy them. In Grandview, I was still the embezzler's wife, still the woman who lived in a burned house, still tainted by association with James's crimes, but an elderly woman approached me during the auction. Her name was Eleanor Margaret Bishop. She was 81 years old, one of the oldest residents of Grandview. She'd lived there her entire life. Everyone in town knew her and respected her. "You're Victoria Somerset, aren't you?" she asked gently. I nodded, feeling ashamed. "I remember you from before the fire," she said. "You used to come to the library where I volunteered. You were always so kind to me. You never made me feel like I was just an old woman taking up space." I didn't know what to say. "I've been watching what's happened to you since," Eleanor continued. "I think you've been treated terribly. And I think your baking is extraordinary. I want to make sure everyone in this town knows it." During the auction, Eleanor bid aggressively on my items. She bought 3 pies for $50 each, an outrageous price. She bought all the bread I donated. By the time she was done, she'd spent over $400. Then she stood up and spoke to the crowd. "I want to say something," Eleanor said, her voice strong despite her age. "There's a woman here who's been through something most of us couldn't survive. She lost her home. She lost her marriage. She lost her standing in this community. And instead of giving up, she's worked every single day to rebuild her life and provide for her children. I think that's what strength looks like. I think that's what character looks like. And I'm ashamed that this town has treated her with anything less than respect." She was looking directly at me when she said it. The room went quiet. Then slowly, people began to clap. Not everyone, but many, enough that I could see the narrative beginning to shift. After that night, things changed. Eleanor became a regular customer. She'd come to Dr. Chen's office sometimes, just to see me. She'd tell me that I was stronger than I knew. She'd introduce me to her friends. She'd publicly defend me when people spoke negatively. And slowly, the community began to see me differently, not as a victim or a failure, but as a survivor, as a woman who'd overcome tremendous adversity. By 1992, 5 years after the fire, I had opened my own bakery, Vicky's Artisan Bread and Cafe. It was a small storefront with a counter, a few tables, and a commercial kitchen in the back. Every penny came from work I'd done with my own hands. Robert finally found his way. He didn't go back to college, but he became a manager at the warehouse where he worked. He married a good woman. He's now 50 years old and runs his own small business, a reflection, I think, of his drive to prove that he could succeed despite his father's failures. Jennifer graduated from high school in 1988 and went to Ohio State University. She became an architect, just as she'd always dreamed. She's brilliant, my dears,
The struggles they faced weren't
buildings
just their
across
story.
the
They are
Midwest.
ours too.
Michael graduated in
This
1995 and went to Kent State University. He became a fire safety inspector.
The struggles they faced
I
weren't just
believe
their story.
by his
They are
childhood
ours too.
trauma. He's devoted his life to helping prevent fires and protecting people. He's turned his fear into purpose. The
struggles
bakery
they faced
expanded.
weren't just their
By
story. They are ours too.
1994, I had two locations. By 1997, I had three. I was employing 40 people, many of them women, who'd been through their own hardships, their own betrayals. I believed in second chances because I'd been given one. The grandchildren started arriving in the late 1990s.
weren't just their
Robert's
story.
3
They
children,
are ours too.
Jennifer's 2 children, Michael's daughter. I held each of them and marveled at how far I'd come from a woman standing
The
on her
struggles
lawn,
they faced weren't just their
holding her
story.
youngest
They are
child,
ours too.
watching her house burn down, to a woman who'd built an empire from nothing in 2001. I received the Grandview Community Service Award. The photograph in the newspaper showed me holding the award, and I was smiling, genuinely smiling. The smile of a woman who'd survived the most public humiliation imaginable and emerged stronger. James was released from prison in 1992 after serving 6 years of his 10-year sentence. He moved to Florida with Pastor Harrison, who'd been released a year earlier. They lived together quietly, and as far as I know, they lived a good life together. I eventually found it in myself to wish them well. They destroyed my marriage, but they'd also freed me from a life built on lies. Looking back now, at 73 years old, I understand that the fire the moment I thought would destroy me actually saved me. It forced me to see the truth. It forced me to become myself instead of being the person James needed me to be. You know, my dears, I spent 23 years trying to be the perfect wife to a man who wasn't capable of honesty. I made myself smaller to accommodate his secrets. I accepted explanations that didn't add up because I wanted to believe in him. I looked away from inconsistencies because looking directly at them would have meant admitting that the life I'd built wasn't what I thought it was. When the fire came, when everything burned, I had two choices. I could have broken. I could have given up. I could have believed that my husband's sins were my sins, that his shame was my shame, that I was somehow complicit in his crimes, because I hadn't seen them coming. Instead, I chose to rebuild. I chose to work as hard as I'd ever worked in my life. I chose to create something beautiful from ashes, literally, from the ashes of my burned home. The woman who stood on the lawn in November 1986, holding my baby and watching my house burn, was broken. The woman who stands before you now is whole. She's successful. She's respected. She's proud. She's built something that matters. I want to tell you something, my dears. Whatever fire is burning in your life right now, whatever betrayal, whatever loss, whatever devastating discovery, you will survive it. You will stand in the ashes, and you will build something beautiful. You will become someone you never imagined you could be. The fire didn't destroy me. It liberated me. It taught me that I was strong enough to carry my children to safety. I was smart enough to rebuild a life. I was worthy of respect and success. I didn't need anyone else to validate my existence. I could do that myself.
We can't forget what brought
That's
us here.
what the fire
The
taught
struggles
me.
they faced weren't
And
just their
that's what
story.
I want
They
you
are
to know.
ours too.
Whatever burns, you survive. And on the other side of the flames, you'll find yourself.
We can't forget
Thank
what
you
brought
for
us here.
listening to me
The struggles
today.
they faced
Don't
weren't
forget
just their
to like
story.
the video
They are ours too.
and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next stories. Share with someone who might be needing a little hope. Where are you watching from? Leave it in the comments.
They are
I
ours
read
too.
every single one, and your messages bring me such joy. God bless you, my dears, and thank you for letting me share this story with you.